Welcome back to another post here on the Roll-Toddy Draft Blog. I'm Baker Leyman here with Herbie May. And now that the Combine's in the rearview mirror, Herbie, we can really start to get a grasp on this NFL draft that's coming up in May and some of the wackiness that's really going to ensue. I know you and I were talking about last night how even with all these new numbers and measurements out for all these prospects, there's just so much that's up in the air and so much to talk about.
Yeah, like you said, we talked about it last night. There's so much unsurety this year. I mean, how many years are you going to guess? I think you and I both got 7 out of the first top 10 picks right last year, and I don't think that's even I don't think anyone can do that this year. There's so much that can happen, so many different needs, so many different positions, and really just a level playing field in everyone's big board this year that it will be all over the place. So, yeah, the Combine helped a little bit. It helped weed out kind of who's truthful and who isn't. But, as far as risers and fallers, I didn't have too many. I think I had 6 big ones, but, there weren't too many huge changes. No one really kind of fell off my big board in a major way or rose in a major way. So I think it's such an equal playing field this year. It's gonna be a fun draft. I think you and I both know that.
Absolutely. We talked a lot about last night how there were guys who obviously should have gone number 1. Clowney was a sure thing going number 1. We all expected it. We might not have always said that was going to happen, but we were pretty sure that if it wasn't Clowney, it was going to be 1 or 2 other people. There wasn't as much up in the air. There was a lot more flow to, well, if this guy goes here are the next 5 picks. No doubt. This year, though, it's not even a lock on who's going to go number 1 because Tampa Bay just spent the day with Jameis Winston yesterday. But even then, with Jameis's off-the-field history, something could happen. He could say something. I don't think he will, but, just for the sake of argument, something could happen that drops him from the number 1. Maybe they meet Marcus Mariota and fall in love with him and he goes number 1. Maybe they just take Leonard Williams because they think he's the top guy in this draft. There's just so much up in the air, and this Combine hasn't helped. As much as it cleared some things up, it really hasn't helped clear up who's going to go where and what team's looking at what. But it did give us some answers thanks to some guys who've risen up our big boards. So, Herbie, you want to dive into who's risen up your big board?
Yeah, this is a guy that I've loved since I saw him play. As a Virginia fan, I've always liked ACC DNs, and Vic Beasley has been my guy since I saw him 2 years ago. I mean, he's an absolute freak. He's 6'3", 246 is what he came in the Combine. He ran a 4.53, 35 reps on the bench. I mean, an absolute freak prospect who I don't think was giving enough recognition because he's coming from the ACC. I think he's a special talent. Comparable to Randy Gregory. The speed is huge. The 4.53 at the Combine is big. The 41-inch vert is huge. I mean, I think he's an absolute freak talent that, you can do a couple different things with. I think you want to keep him slim, and you want to be able, he could keep his hand off the dirt, like Terrell Suggs, or he could put his hand in the dirt as a defensive end. 6'3" is kind of that, kind of mid-range in between those two positions. He's an absolute freak talent that I don't think you pass up on in the first 10 picks if you need a player like that, if you need a pass rusher, which are always needed in the first round.
I think I like Vic Beasley a lot more than I did coming into this season. He definitely grew as a player. He kind of evolved into more of an actual pass rusher with moves and stunts inside, used his hands effectively rather than just beating his guy around the edge. But, like you said, he does have that great speed that he showed off at the Combine. And he came to the Combine 20 pounds heavier, which I think was a huge thing for him. He was only played the season around 225 or 230. That's very light for a defensive end. Even a guy who might be standing up to play outside linebacker, that's still very light. I think he can pack on some more weight and still be an effective speed rusher. And it's going to be exciting to see where he ends up in this draft. I think he's firmly planted himself within the top 15. It's going to be interesting to see who either trades up for him or tries to go and get him just because of that explosive athleticism.
I don't necessarily know if he's a player that you draft up to get because I think there's such an equal talent across those defensive ends in those first couple of picks. So, you get Leonard Williams, Shane Ray. I mean, all those guys could go kind of, I don't know who's trading up to get him. But, I think Vic, Jesus, we were talking about Daniel Jeremiah putting Dante Fowler at the third overall pick to Jacksonville, which just I don't think is going to happen. But I could easily see Randy Gregory or Vic Beasley going right there.
Yeah, for me, as far as risers go, we're gonna stay with the edge rushing category, and I'm gonna go with Bud Dupree out of Kentucky. Now, Dupree is a guy who a lot of people started to rave about this season. He's had a big year since Stoops took over that program, just had a very solid end to his career at Kentucky these past 2 seasons. But I was very skeptical. I watched some of his games tape and some of his highlights, and even some of his really explosive highlights. You're kind of like, it was the same thing I had with Vic Beasley. He just beat his guy around the end, and the offensive tackle couldn't get a hand on him. Well, at the Combine, he showed off not just the ability to have great speed and great explosiveness off the edge, but he ran that 4.56 40. He had a 42-inch vertical and a 138-inch broad jump. All those, and while he didn't do the bench press, which is something I'd really like to see because he measured in at 6'4", 270, all the broad jump, the high jump, and the vertical, and then that 40 time just show me that there's all kinds of untapped athleticism within this guy that if you can just tweak that technique ever so slightly, he can be an effective player in the NFL, a very dangerous player in the NFL. And playing against the top competition, the SEC has obviously only helped him and helped him get better.
I like that pick a lot. I think he's always been one of my favorite guys going into this draft class.
Yeah,
I haven't
had a lot more than me for most of this process.
Yeah, and I don't think I've had him in my top 50. I forget where I had him in my last big board, but I've got him right. I think in the 10 to 20 range, which I think is perfect for him. When you compare him to Vic Beasley, obviously he's bigger, but he's more geared to that explosive type play, which are huge when they happen, but they happen a lot less. So there's a lot less consistency than what Vic Beasley has. But like you said, he is an absolute monster at 6'4", 270. I think we're all waiting to see him do the bench press. When you got a guy of that size that can get up that high in that vert, you got passes that are getting deflected all over the place, which is just which is a skill that is absolutely necessary in this new league with these quarterbacks who are running all over the place. So I think Bud Dupree is going to be an absolute steal, and which I'm assuming he goes, probably after 10, maybe after 15, but he'll be an absolute steal wherever he goes.
I have Bud at my 17th overall ranked prospect right now on my new big board. And I think after not having him on the board before, I think that's very fair.
I've got Bud at 17 too.
Great minds think alike, man. And, I just think that's not just only a very fair place for him based on what we've seen on his tape and at this Combine, but I think that there's a lot of room for him to grow as he goes through goes through the Combine, but goes through more of his own personal workouts, does interviews with teams. I think a lot of people are going to fall in love with that size and that athleticism, and it's very hard not to. If he can, and as I mentioned, he's just a guy who needs to be coached up a little bit, and he can basically take all of that athletic talent after just a little bit of technique coaching and really use it effectively. You mentioned Terrell Suggs when talking about Vic Beasley. I think that Terrell Suggs, there's a lot of Terrell Suggs in Bud Dupree.